is the best time to be in HR. This is the most critical time to be in HR. Unlike any other period in my entire career, there's an opportunity to really visibly make positive impact in the organization. And so when it comes to things like management training or bringing organizations along at the pace of change that's happening in the world right now, like this is our bread and butter. We were made for this, right? And so my advice to anyone, no matter what stage you are in your career, is find the ways that you can create impact in your business. If it's cross training, if it's upskilling, if it's onboarding, research and do that thing so well and find the way for you to make your voice inside your own organization. I know if we're just specifically talking about management skills, it is really critical that people managers, especially early in career, have them. And so make sure you're building programs where you can provide them on the spot education. Make sure you're structuring your HR business partner teams or your HR generalist teams to have a lifeline resource to managers to be able to have those coaching conversations. If you're
Hi, I'm Christy, your host for Inside the C-Suite, where execs get real about leadership, impact, and what truly drives high-stake decisions. Today on Inside the C-Suite, we're joined by Stephanie Manzelli, Chief People Officer at Employ. She's a leader who aligns people strategy to business outcomes with heart, discipline, and clarity. Stephanie was named one of this year's Inspiring Leaders by Inspiring Workplaces and is a proud member of the Forbes Human Resource Council. Stephanie is helping HR lead the evolution of work, especially as AI reshapes how teams operate. If you're a human centered leader or just want to show up more authentically, this episode is for you. Let's jump in, shall we? Stephanie, I am so excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I would love for you, if you don't mind, just to introduce yourself to the audience and a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, I'm Stephanie Manzelli. I'm the Chief People Officer at Employ Inc. And my background is all in transformational leadership. So I sort of enter companies at times of change and create concert out of chaos.
You are definitely the queen change maker. And you guys have a lot going on where you are. So, like, take us up 50,000 feet. What are you dealing with today?
Oh gosh. So I think I'm dealing with the same thing HR professionals across the board are dealing with. It's performance and compensation cycle. We're doing our annual kickoffs. We're doing our annual resets. But something that's unique to us is actually we're welcoming our new CEO into the organization. So preparing for that and taking a look at all the things you got to take a look at when you have new leadership coming in.
So, the first 90 days of any employee is kind of the telltale. And I can't imagine bringing in a new CEO their first 90 days and then also your first 90 days with them. What are you doing right now to prepare for a really smooth transition?
I think it starts long before somebody is actually brought in. I think that there are layers of onboarding that have to happen at the executive level or pre-boarding, as I call it. The one thing that I think is always so important is and the way that I approach it is it's great to be a historian, but don't be precious because context is helpful, but it is not the thing we make all decisions based on. I would say that's something, that we keep top of mind, but it's all about making sure that we get this individual, running alongside the business and up to speed as quickly as possible.
Well, and I know that you guys are known for having a strong executive leadership team. So, how are you helping bolster them to embrace what's coming?
Oh gosh. I'm so fortunate. I think I might have the best executive team out there. I'm so fortunate that I have colleagues that find things like onboarding experiences equally as important. And so for us, what we've done is we've come together as a team to say, what are all of the things that this person needs to be aware of in our business, to have demonstrations of, to either understand the historical context of. What are the in-flight projects that we need somebody to weigh in on? It's a lot to ask somebody to have an opinion a few days in, when they're just sort of landing. But if we can make sure that we chunk it out in a way that feels digestible, that's the goal. And I'm so fortunate that they've been in the journey with me to make sure that they are onboarding this individual alongside me as well. It's equally important that they take an active role in it.
I know onboarding is super important, and we've all gone to different employers where I've had an experience on day one that I thought, wow, I have 72 tasks that you want me to do on my first day. I did not want to return my second day. What is different between onboarding a CEO and maybe a lower level individual? What are the differences that you see between those two? Or is your approach the same?
I would say not a lot, but everything, right? So I think if we think about onboarding as two separate things, there's task and there's experience, right? And there's so much coming at a person when they start. I don't think it matters at what point in your career you are. You're drinking from a fire hose. These
Hmm.
people have all this context and information. They're talking past me, right? And so I don't think that changes whether you're at your first job or your 25th job, or if there's a C in front of your title or an entry level title. So I think that that's true. The tasks probably remain the same. It's how we approach them that slightly varies. I think we do a little bit more white glove service where we can, because that's the scalable way to do it. But I think experientially, there's always got to be just a couple of minutes for context. And so talked about being a historian. When we bring somebody into, a pricing and packaging meeting, or into a strategy meeting, or into a goal planning meeting, we always need to spend the first 5 to 10 minutes with a tiny bit of context, so that going into the conversation, there is a ground for that person to understand and to have an opportunity to weigh in. And so that's sort of been our approach. And we make sure that either before or after the meetings, we're providing the necessary context so that everyone can feel like they're set up for success. And through that process, it's just been so incredible to watch just the pace of onboarding. I would say the other thing that we do in this situation that maybe is different, we provide guidance to hiring managers for folks, earlier in career, about who the employee should meet with, what kind of meet and greets should be happening. In this scenario, though, we want an executive to get in front of their people ASAP. And so, this individual would be, having meet and greets with the layer below the executive team. They would be getting out there to meet employees on the road, since we're a remote organization. It just the amount of depth that we get this person into as quickly as possible is I would say probably the biggest difference.
No, I love that. And there's so many people out there trying to look at the different programs they have with always trying to impact retention, right? Productivity, all the different things. And I always look at that first 90 days is so crucial. Either you did a great job to get them where they need to be, or you didn't. And it's a dual edged sword, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But if you're speaking to maybe Stephanie, some of the HR leaders or directors that
Mhm.
are coming up in their career and they're listening to this, what
Yeah.
guidance would you have? Because you've been at it for a while. You're a pretty profound leader, an inspiring leader. Is there
Yeah.
nuggets of advice that you would give those that are looking to change the way they do their onboarding, the way they handle their people?
Yes. It's actually the way that I approach most things. I would say block yourself think time and zoom out 50,000 feet and think about what makes my organization complex. Break apart the tasks and the experience that you want somebody to have, and then build a process around that. It has to be streamlined and not confusing. The tasks have to be done. Benefits have to be elected. You must participate in an onboarding session. You have to work with IT to get your computer set up. All of that has to happen. It's just how you approach it that needs to feel authentic to your company and not overwhelming to your employee. The bigger part that I think makes or breaks an employee's decision to stay with a company is the experience. So, are you doing those things ahead of time to pre-board somebody? Are you having those outreach conversations? I've seen some organizations do beautiful things with teams sending like a welcome video of the whole group being, together and welcoming the new hire, and just gets emailed to them. I've seen emails that are sent that we're so excited to see you, and these are some of our working norms. What are yours? So it starts before somebody starts, but then once they actually start, it's about creating spaces for them to keep up with you as you're running, because they don't have the answers, and making sure that you're bringing people along. And so that's what I would say. I would say zoom up 50,000 feet, really think about what makes your organization complex, and then find a plan that is scalable for your organization to bring people along in the process. And I don't think that changes if you're, a level one or two, or you have a C in front of your title.
I love that guidance. And what was your most memorable onboarding?
Well, do you want like the best or the worst?
Rip the band aid off. Tell me both.
So I use all of my experiences as a stepping stone, and I can even like recite experiences at 22 that have dictated how I think about things today, right? So I use everything as a growth place. I would say Worst onboarding by far was a Fortune 100 company, public, obviously public organization. It was a hands-off onboarding. The role was remote before roles were really largely remote, and it was totally hands-off. You logged into an LMS and you watched videos all day, and you couldn't progress in your onboarding until you watched the videos. And they weren't videos that taught you how to do the job. They were videos from just the C-suite executives welcoming you to the company and explaining what their function does. But until you explain what the company's flow is, it's kind of hard to make those connection points. It was like 3 days of that. And there were these ergonomic workspace videos since you work from home. And it would ask you, like, how are you sitting right now? If you failed the test, you would get a ping every week to ask if you've changed the way you sit to be like compliant. It was not a good onboarding. At all. I would say the best onboarding, though, also a Fortune 100 organization. Earlier in my career, they had this program. I'm not sure what it's called today, but way back when it was called the Journey of the Red Dress, and it was a retail organization.
Oh,
And
wow.
they walked you through the journey of a dress, all the way from the buyer through to planning and allocation, all the way through to the customer leaving the store with that red dress. And so you went through the journey and you understood how every department impacts the revenue of that organization and the culture of that organization. That was just the perfect context setting as you entered a new organization. And the other thing that they did was I worked in the field when I started there. So they made us on board for at least a day in the store. And so I had to work the floor and really understand how to merchandise the clothes and all of the pieces and parts of working in a store location. I thought that was great.
That's brilliant. I think my best story was I got flowers and then I posted it on all the socials that I was so excited. So marketing got a nod for the flowers that were sent. But I love that getting in the field and actually understanding that that's so critical because there's a lack of empathy. I think the higher you climb, there's a lack of empathy for the rest of the organization. So did you learn anything when you were working the shop or working the retail floor? Was there any like ahas for you going into that role?
Well, yes. What I took with me, though, was everybody equally contributes to the success of an organization. It does not matter what your pay rate is, it does not matter what your title is. Every single person needs to be working in concert for an organization to be a successful organization, which means everybody has to be on the same page. What I learned back then, and I'm almost ashamed to admit this, I think when I was much younger, if you had asked me what a retail store manager does, I probably would have given you a really bold word, probably a really ignorant response. And having done that job and having seen it, the things that a store manager manages, I mean, the complexity, they are CEOs of the location that they manage. They're managing interpersonal dynamics. They're managing P&Ls. They're managing inventory, merchandising, just the sheer volume of context switching that these individuals go through in a day. I have more respect for retail workers and hospitality workers than than I ever did when I was younger.
I love that so much. So let me ask you this. What's one behavior leaders think that motivates a team under pressure, but actually erodes trust?
Oh, okay. So I have worked with executives that like to have like a tank around a table, and everybody comes to the table with sort of different processing abilities, right? Some of us need to take information away and come back to the table with an idea or a solution. Some of us are shoot from the hip kind of people, and not one approach is better than the other, right? Each of us sort of has the ability to process at different paces and add different things at different times. But I've had leaders that maybe don't flex their approach. And what I think it does is it shows people I never want to be the person who doesn't have an answer. And so I'm going
Mm.
to do everything I can to always be the person that has the answer. And I think that fragments the ability to build trust and be a team because there's always one person who's not fast enough with the, idea generation or the solution generation. And then there's always one person that's dominating because everybody wants to make sure that they're adding value. And I really think that that erodes trust very quickly.
You make me think of you done your Clifton Strengths by chance?
I
Gallup.
have.
Okay. Is context in there with you?
Yes, it is. Woo is also in there too.
So I recently got my Clifton Strengths certification, and I was
Yeah.
talking to my son, who is a academic advisor for the University of Texas, and he coaches on this himself. So we did
Yeah.
kind of like a mom son moment, right? And context is his number one, and strategy is my number one. Complete opposite.
Yeah.
I'm not shocked by that. And when he was young, he would say, "Mom, I need context. I need context." I'm like, "No, I'm your mom. You need to just do what I said and like, let's move on." Which is also why I wasn't the best boss early on in my career. I'm 51, he's 32. We're having the conversation and he's talking about the Clifton strengths and context. And I said, "Sweetheart, I am so sorry. I did not meet you where you needed me to meet you. I understand that you need the history, you need the context to be able to, like you said earlier, you said grounded, give them something to ground them." So that's what I was lacking, was providing what my son very much needed, was like a grounding space to have the conversation. So I love what you said because it makes me think of the strengths that we all carry, and when you're in a meeting like that, not everyone's going to show up and be the quick one to respond, or ideation takes over and they're coming out of the gate with I strong ideation, so I know. But there are so many brilliant things that come from each and every employee, whether, their background, right? And how they came up and how old they are, just so many different nuances that makes their share or their input so precious. So
Yeah.
I love what you said because it does fragment trust at the very base, the very root. That's incredible.
But I think context without being precious, right? It's got to be an equal measure. I think context is important, sure. You cannot be precious about it. You have to be able to pivot quickly and move past it. I think it's equal measure.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that 100%. So, by the way, congratulations on your inspiring leader
Well, thanks.
by inspiring workplaces. So, and you're also on the Forbes Human Resource Council.
I am, yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about this because to me, this is you digging in.
Yeah. First of all, it's an honor to have been included in any of these things, especially when our own employees recognize some of the efforts that we've undergone, which I think in many cases that's what's contributed to it. For me, I always want to be a little bit better. And that's to say I'm competitive with myself. And so I'm constantly looking out there in the market or in my peer group, understanding what are other companies doing? What are other approaches that are working? The world is moving so quickly. Technology is moving so quickly. The way that we lead people and people functions needs to move just as fast as those things. Our employees are being exposed to scrolling on TikTok, scrolling on Instagram. And so they're getting these bite-sized pieces of information and their brain is like quite literally rewiring. And so being out there and learning as much as I possibly can about what's working and what other use cases it's working for, it helps me just be a better leader internally and build out comms and programming and all of those things.
What is some of the challenges? So I know we talk about if we look at our organization, the makeup of our organization, right? So it's a honeycomb of diversity. I borrowed that from Gail Obaski if she's watching. What do you see differences in the workplace by, you and I were talking just before, being a woman in the workplace is a little bit different, right? There was a specific example that we brought up that's like, we should talk about that on the podcast because there's so many different points of view,
Yeah.
like just to meet our employees where they are and to be mindful that our experience might be different, right? Like we might be coming back from maternity leave or a myriad of different other things. But what were we talking about the differences of each individual employee's experiences?
Oh gosh. Well, I think we were talking about maiden name versus married name.
We were, yes, things that most men don't wouldn't have to worry about often. So my maiden name is Honeycutt, and I hope that I don't have to change it to anything crazy. But you were sharing about your fantastic name, and I just thought, well, that's interesting because so many people don't know what that's like. When I changed my name at IBM, it shut down every system you could think of. I had to go and say, no, it's actually me, and send all of the different documentation just to change my email at work.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I have women that work for me. I 2 employees got married, on my org last year. Not only did their names change in the system, one it took months to get her name changed, but then I didn't know who she was. And so then I'm like, sending confidential emails and I'm like, "I really hope this is the right person." Your picture looks like the right picture, but I mean, just some people never have to think about it. I don't know if you've ever seen that picture of it was a picture outside of a Starbucks, and I don't even know if this is where it originally came from, so forgive me if somebody hears this and I'm not quoting it properly, but there was a photo outside of a Starbucks, and you know how they have the little barista stands? And there was a quote on there about, "You don't know what somebody's going through. You don't know what somebody's internal struggle is, so treat them with kindness." And that was the theme. That was not the proper quote, I do know that, but I've taken that with me. I know it sounds ridiculous to have taken, like, a
No, it doesn't.
meme on the internet and take it with you, but it has, and it's how I show up as an HR professional internally. I have to do hard things sometimes. But your experience matters to me just as much as the thing I have to get done. And so I want to treat every single person with kindness and with as much respect as possible. And I never want to be in a situation where I've had to do something internally and walking down the street and feeling like I need to go to the other side of the road, right? Like I never want that. I always want to be able to look at an employee and to have a conversation with them. That's my ethos. That guides everything I do is to just try and take a moment and acknowledge everybody else's experience in the same moment that we're together.
So not all leaders show up like you, right? Not all leaders think from a heart-centered place. So if you're that leader that doesn't know it, how can you tell that you're the source of the noise in the organization?
Boy, I think you have to have people who are willing to have difficult conversations, right? Who are willing to be the one to sit down with these leaders and to say to them, "This is intent versus impact. This is your approach, and if you had tried it a little bit differently, this is what the net result would be." I try with my leaders to show them the value or the impact before I have to give the coaching. So I do a lot of executive coaching. We have big jobs, and we move very fast, and so I do a lot of executive coaching. I always have, but for me, I always try to talk about why we're gonna try something differently versus you did X wrong. Because that I think is the fastest way to get people to shut down. I think, asking people consultative questions about their approach, trying to make recommendations that suit whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish in a way that kind of meets people where they need to be met. Those are some of the things that I've tried, but never do I just hit somebody with it right off the bat. I don't think I've ever done that. I probably did once and it probably turned out really bad and I've never tried it again. But yeah.
Oh my gosh, most of us learn from our mistakes if we're self-aware, right?
Yeah.
And I know that you're in the middle of performance reviews and all the
Yeah.
different things, and I've often, and I believe this, but I've often heard no one should ever be surprised about the conversation. If you've got a good manager, I'm assuming that they're coaching, mentoring, having conversations, stretch goals, whatever that looks like for them. What is your thought around that? Because I know you're in the middle of this. Is that kind of your guideline too? And how do you help facilitate that within the organization?
Nothing makes me more angry than when people are surprised by their performance review. And so I was just saying this to somebody the other day, like the history of performance reviews, they came around like 60s, 1970s, and it was a formalized structure for people to be able to get pay increases, right? And that is why a performance review started. In some ways, they're antiquated, and in other ways, they're not. The reason that we still have to have them is because employees are not getting frequent and candid feedback throughout the year. Because if we all truly knew how we were performing, it wouldn't always feel like a shock. And that rests at the feet of the people manager. If I'm being completely honest with you, I think HR teams create programs to provide education, but when you become a manager, that is an inherent expectation. Earlier, when you first started chatting with me about this question, you had said not every leader is like that, right? Not every leader puts kindness at the front of it. But I'm so fortunate to have the job I have. And there isn't a day that I don't wake up thankful for the role I get to play in other people's lives. And yes, I do know that not everyone feels that way. But if you're a people leader out there, you should feel that way. You should feel that this is a blessing and an opportunity to impact other people's lives in a really positive way. How do you give people constructive feedback and positive feedback to reinforce the quality of their work and to make them better professionals and to help grow their career? That should be something that you're honored to be able to offer to somebody, not feel afraid of and not feel as a burden. What is my responsibility as an HR person or professional is to provide you avenues and education to be able to land feedback in a way that people can absorb and implement the learnings.
I love what you said because I also think it's a privilege. If you are put in a position of leading people, it is a privilege. And there was a study done by Gallup, and they identified that there are two main indicators that employees or followers wanted to see from leadership, and one was trust, and one was hope. And hope's actually number one. And so, if you think about it, whatever you do to instill hope,
Yes.
that's going to help your employee population feel hopeful, feel productive. It's going to impact your organization in a positive way, your team in a positive way, your community in a positive way. And I think the managers out there that just don't like it, like it's not in them, are probably not in the right position, would be my guess. And I know a lot of managers coming up, they don't get training. I know when I got pulled into management the first time, it was my first time. All I knew is what I didn't want to be like and what I did want to be like. And I had no training and I failed so hard, but I learned.
You course correct the opposite way.
Yeah. What guidance do you have for HR teams out there? Because I do believe that your position is a strategic position, and when utilized correctly, is you guys can orchestrate the entire ecosystem that you're in.
Yeah.
But there's so many junior team members that have just been beat down over the past few years about it. Are they worthy? Is their role going to stick around? Is it meaningful? Is it purposeful? What guidance do you have to those HR professionals trying to find their voice, trying to lean in strategically and really make an impact? Because most people I know that got into this field because they really care about humans. But there's just a disconnect I see between the business and the people, and HR is always stuck in the middle.
Always stuck in the middle. And you and I have talked about this in the past, a while back, is this is the best time to be in HR. This is the most critical time to be in HR. Unlike any other period in my entire career, there's an opportunity to really visibly make positive impact in the organization. And so when it comes to things like management training or bringing organizations along at the pace of change that's happening in the world right now, like this is our bread and butter. We were made for this, right? And so my advice to anyone, no matter what stage you are in your career, is find the ways that you can create impact in your business. If it's cross training, if it's upskilling, if it's onboarding, research and do that thing so well and find the way for you to make your voice inside your own organization. If we're just specifically talking about management skills, it is really critical that people managers, especially early in career, have them. And so make sure you're building programs where you can provide them on the spot education. Make sure you're structuring your HR business partner teams or your HR generalist teams to have a lifeline resource to managers to be able to have those coaching conversations. If you're a lean team and you can only provide training at key points of the year, make those key points relevant to the activity that they're undergoing at any given time. Don't just train them on something and expect them to remember it 12 months later. Provide it to them at point in time that they can utilize it. Those would be my recommendation.
I really like the last one that you shared about give them the training that's timely and with the action, because I've seen that as well. If they get trained on something in April, but they have to do it in October, you might as well train them all over again because that's not their primary function. So they're not worried about check this box and hit submit over here and then file it over here. They just don't even care, right? It's not on their radar. Got a question for you. What does responsible AI look like when layoffs, performance, or hiring are on the line?
Can I tell you something really unpopular?
Of course.
I think firing people because of AI is like the world's biggest cop out. I just think it's such a terrible PR excuse. Honestly, I like lose respect for companies. I'm probably blacklisting myself because it's not real. You know what I mean? I think we find efficiency. I think the people that lose their jobs to AI are the people that don't learn to use AI. It's a tool to augment everything that we do, right? It's a tool to help us be more efficient, reduce cycle time on things, have a second set of, proverbial eyes on some of our work to get answers faster, to provide us insights and analytics at an increased pace. It doesn't replace humans, especially not in HR. If I'm being completely honest with you, there is still human judgment that is required. And so, shout out to all the marketing, PR, and HR people. Please stop using that as your excuse for laying people off. That isn't it.
And we are not going to cancel Stephanie for speaking the truth. Just going to put that out here. You're going to have to come through Bouncer Christie. No, I agree with you. I agree with you. I think it's another organization that doesn't want to do the hard things. They
Yes.
don't want to do the hard things, so they take the easy way out. And it's confusing our community. I've never seen a community so confused. I had a young lady that I worked with, endorse her till the cows come home. She's phenomenal, cannot find a job.
Yeah.
And she reached out to me last night. She goes, what do I need to do? She goes, it's nuts. I've got like 1,000 applications out there. There are bots to help you get more applications. There's AI that you can use to bolster your resume. And I told her, I said, I want you to go take these classes. And they were
Yeah.
all AI. I said, learn how to leverage AI to do what you're doing, but to make you more efficient so you can show that you're keeping up. That was the only guidance I had for her to stand out amongst all these other people. And it's really that kind of like entry to mid level that I'm seeing is really struggling. So I love what you said that you're kind of putting a line in the sand and being bold. Of course you are. I mean, you're inspirational. So what happens when HR reacts instead of architects?
It's messy. It's a mess, and we are often the ones that are the cleanup crew versus sort of the people that help the structure. Many years ago in my career, I did a RIF, unfortunately, a reduction in force, and I sat down with the CTO, and I still follow the CTO, and I said to him, we got the instructions from finance, and I said to him, "Okay, what are we going to say to our employees? What are we going to say to them?" And he said, "Stephanie, that's administrative. That's operational. That's logistics. You figure that out later. Like, that isn't, I need to put names on a page. Can you help me figure out which names to put on a page?" Said, "Sure can. But what we say at the end is what we use as our selection criteria. So we need to be authentic throughout this process. It needs to be real. And so what is the reason that we are doing this? And what are you going to say to your employees? Because that's our North Star. That guides everything that we do. And I promise you, nobody wants to ever do a reduction in force, least of all the HR team. But I'm telling you, that was the most authentic. And the feedback we got from our employees, as well as the folks that were departing, was that this was the most thoughtful way that we had cared for humans in a very unfortunate process that we possibly could. And it all comes down to little things like, what are you going to say? And the small details of the survivor's guilt. How do you make sure that you provide people who remain resources to support them through the transition? And how do you support the people that are departing an organization through that transition? And all of that matters. If people feel respected through a process that is incredibly unfortunate, it mitigates all kinds of risks.
Well, and it's human.
It's human.
I've unfortunately been a part of a lot of rifts and decision makers and watching how they determine who's who. But I love the way that you said it was so eloquent and just so simple. What are we going to tell them at the end? That's our North Star. Like that right there is money in the bank. I might have to quote you on that, I think, because it was a very tactical, practical, just visual guide of at the end of the day, what are we telling them? That's our North Star. Chef's kiss. I love it. It's so great. Well, I am so excited that you came on to talk to us, Stephanie. You are just such an inspirational leader, and I am so honored to know you and the team that is getting to work with you. I hope they know how lucky you are because not all leaders in your seat are like you. Is there anything that you would like to leave, any nuggets or wisdom that we didn't cover?
Well, I would just like to say I'm not perfect. I have my flaws too. No, I would say, I think careers are long. And my one piece of advice, it doesn't matter what function, what department, what level you are, use everything as a learning opportunity. And even when you're in the suck of it all, even when you're in the hard moments, like there is something you're learning, whether it is, I don't want to do it this way again, or I see a pathway to a different way to do this, or even just how you select the roles you take next. Always, always, always use that growth mindset. Think about everything as a learning opportunity because no matter where your career takes you, it just is so much richer. And if you are a leader, spend a little bit more time focusing on kindness because it pays off dividends in the end.
Gosh, there's so many quotes that just came out of you again. Like I'm going to go back and just write all of them down. I love quotes, guys. So if you have them, send them my way. I love that you said that because it is so important and it matters. And we learn the most when we're in the suck.
We do.
Yeah. When you're in the suck, that's when you learn the most. That's when the universe is saying you need to learn something to get to the next level. You need to learn something to get to the next stage. So, very well put. Thank you so much again for holding space for myself and letting me learn from you and our audience as well. Until next time, guys, go follow Stephanie, her company, like, subscribe, and shoot us some comments on this episode if you like it. Ciao.
Thank you.